Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome to the floor of my apartment. I like to sit down here when I'm talking about topics that feel really near and dear to my heart, about the modalities of the way we move through this world. This is a little bit more impromptu, but I actually spent a lot more time thinking about this topic and preparing for it than I had even initially planned, because we are going to be talking about the contracted controlling state that we all experience at different levels and in different ways in being human in this life, because it's a natural part of the mechanics of being in a human body and moving through it. And this is a deep topic because for me, this topic taps into judgment, shame, guilt and shame around being too controlling and tight, as well as not being controlling and tight enough. It also goes into thinking about, some of us are going to have chronic seasons of feeling contracted, right? Where we are going through so much change, so much overwhelm that we contract down. But this can also be about the mini moments within a day or a week where we get little moments of contraction. And I think this conversation is going to work pretty well for both cases, because what we're really going to be talking about today is micro practices, which is my favorite way to do anything that has to do with feeling like we're in touch with that deep self and with kind of divine energy. It's all about the micro practices. It's all about giving ourselves very small little moments that help us connect and see. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. But I first want to just start off by saying, like I mentioned, I think the topic of feeling that contracted, controlling energy, where we really feel like we're maybe in overdrive. We're really focused on one thing. We might be obsessively checking our phones or checking our emails or thinking about the outcome of an unknown that we don't know about, right? We all know what this modality feels like. We've all been there in big and small ways. But so much of that feeling has been taught to us as a moral issue. That a lot of times, like in American culture, for example, we've been kind of taught that being in a contracted, focused, pressurized state of being is the moral way to live a life. This means you are being accountable and responsible. This means that you are somebody who is worth being here because you are not failing people, you're not being lazy, you're not being slothful. So there's been kind of a valor put often on also keeping ourselves locked in a tight place. I think it's also interesting coming from the spiritual side of things, because this has also had a lot of messaging around it that if we're not in an open, trusting state, if we're not just flowing with the universe and feeling really chilled out, that we are not getting the best that life has to offer, that we are missing out, and that we are failing some kind of soulful mission. So I think it's really interesting how many judgments and how much weight is put on both of these states from two different lenses, and how that can really throw us out of whack and actually leave us feeling really disempowered when it comes to how we want to toggle between these two things. Because here's the thing, the first thing I would say about all of this, first of all, like I said, this is not a moral issue. This is not a moral issue, and it's not something that we need to feel bad about when we are going through a season of contraction or a season of feeling a bit more controlling. Because these play a natural role. I think first step here in working with this energetics, the energetics of this and how it's embodied, we're going to start in the controlled state. Then I'll talk to you in a little bit about toggling between that feeling of being really tight and in hyperfocus and overdrive, or just feeling contracted, and toggling into the trust part of it and how we can work with both of these. But the first thing I want to talk about is just noticing it in our bodies. Because it doesn't just come from chronic stress. It can. And for me, for example, I just went through a huge season of contraction. Like, the more I look back at the last year of my life and probably beyond, I have been so contracted because I was going through a very chronically stressful situation with immigrating during a pandemic, where there was a lot of paperwork, there was a lot of red tape, there were a lot of unknowns, uncertainties, and things that just triggered all my safety and security issues. I felt so overwhelmed all the time. And I would find myself doing a lot of obsessive things just to like kind of hold on to some semblance of reality. So for me, that's how I just went through a really chronic season of that. But it can also show up because we're eager or excited and we're really ready. You know, we want to lock in that friendship or that new relationship. We have a new creative idea and we want to make it happen. So we can also get into this state of kind of tight, controlling energy when we're also really, really excited. And our adrenaline's up and we're ready to go. So we can recognize this in different places in our lives that they show up. In fact, I just had that experience. I met somebody, a new friend, who we just hit it off and connected. And I went home that night and I caught myself getting really contracted, wanting to kind of like message this person and be like, how are you doing? And I just recognized that in myself. Like I was excited, I was feeling really good, but I also felt very much like I needed to have control over it, right? So we can see it in lots of different places. And I think this is so important because we can start to just have a viewpoint of whenever we are feeling that sense of control of ourselves, essentially. A lot of times we are trying to control ourselves into controlling the rest of the world, right? If we can just control ourselves enough, be moral or accountable enough, we are going to be able to control the outcomes of everything around us, right? Like that's where we're at. We're looking for safety. We are longing for communion. We are longing for answers. We are longing for all of that. We want to come from a place of what I'm going to call compassionate mechanics. We're just looking at the mechanics of the embodiment of this longing and this tightness and this somewhat sympathetic nervous system, which has to do with fight and flight, right? We don't need to put a judgment on it. It's there. It's happening. Oh, I am embodying the energy of feeling somewhat contracted. I would like to know what the outcome of this is going to be. I would like to know I'm going to be secure in this. I would like to have this resolved. So we're just looking at that. We're noticing it. And you may, in just thinking about this and taking some of the judgment off, you may even notice you might have a specific thing you like to do when you're in the embodiment of feeling a little bit more contracted and self-controlled. You know, we all have things that we do that kind of help us feel like we have some control. So you might look at what those are and kind of feel through them and notice when they're coming up. But essentially too, just feel this in your body. You know, notice what it feels like to be in the embodiment of the more contracted. And this is a bit more shut down energy, right? We are not looking for answers outside of the little loop that we are often in during this. We are looking at the one thing that we are wanting to be resolved or understood. So our sight is very focused. And we are looking for answers within that same loop. But that's okay. Once again, this is fine. This is part of it. It's just so freeing to be like, oh yeah, that's where I am right now. Okay. So as we get more into these compassionate mechanics, this is where we can start to play with toggling between a couple of different settings. So just imagine a little toggle, a light toggle, light switch, however you want to say it, some kind of setting switch that you have with you. And one of the switches is for this landscape where we're in a little bit more control, we're feeling tight, we're feeling maybe contracted, maybe like withdrawing, maybe there's a lot of different ways this can show up, either in hypervigilance or in pulling ourselves away, right? So we have that energy. And let's just feel that in our bodies for a second. What does that feel like? What are the textures? What are the tones? Where do you feel it most in your body? You know, for me, when I'm in that tight contracted space, I have like this ball of fire in my solar plexus, and all the energy from like up here in my head and my throat all goes to my core. Like all the attention is kind of like sucked in here, and I'm no longer open, right? I've closed down. I'm feeling anxious. I can also often, I will notice this. I will literally be like crawling into my shell. So just notice, what is it? What is it when you're embodying the contracted state, which is a natural state, and oftentimes we need to have it because we've got a lot of information coming at us. I just want to say that. So if you're crawling into your shell, how are you embodying the mechanics of contraction? Okay, feeling it, seeing it, noticing it. Now, because this is not a moral issue, and there is no right and wrong here, and there is nothing that is more valuable or less valuable, we're just going to have the permission to toggle to the other vision, which is the trusting open one. So in this premise, in this tone, right, there's nothing that we need to be doing in order to figure out the ending to the story, the solution to the problem. We are giving that over to the larger divine energy, right? We are giving that over to all the elements working with us. We're just going to say, okay, I don't know, right? So notice as we toggle into that, we give ourselves permission to just dip our toes into it. What are the tones and textures of this feeling? Take a look around. There's no rule here. If you are feeling kind of nervous to get into trusting state, or you're feeling some resistance to this, because I think that's very common, just know you don't have to stay in this trusting space. If it feels like it's not serving you or something, or the worried guardian part of yourself is just like, nope, just tell yourself, like, we're just going to visit this room for a couple of minutes. We're just going to visit this vision, this energetic, this embodiment for a couple of minutes. Just see what it's about today. You can just tell any guardian parts of yourself that. And just go step over there. Take a look around. Like, put those vision goggles on. What do you notice about your body? What are the tones? What are the textures? What are the feelings? What do you start to notice and see? And one of the things I like to do, speaking of compassionate mechanics, compassionate embodiment of different states of being, creating, and doing, one of my favorite things to do if I'm feeling very hemmed in like this, which is, when you're in fight or flight, or you are in a very excited, hyper-focused state, because it's not always negative. Once again, the controlling focus state can also be really great. Your sight gets here. Yeah, I might be working on a painting, right? My sight is there. And after a couple of hours, sometimes I really need to change up my vision, right? So one thing you can really do if you're feeling some resistance is just literally look all the way to the right, all the way to the left. You can also, like, just your eyeballs. You can also do it with your head. Just start to look around. Notice everything around you. And that will change your embodiment on quite a literal basis. But also as you step into and you toggle into this other vision space, this other embodiment space, notice how you're feeling. Notice what colors, textures, and feelings you're having. Notice if it feels maybe like really light and empty. That might feel really, really good if you've been feeling overloaded with information. It might also feel like ideas and clarity are having the easier time coming in. It might also feel like something that seemed really big and was holding you in the contracted state, the perspective shifts and it takes up its proper size within the dynamics of everything. So just kind of notice, what are the differences? What are the different textures? You can have fun with this. You can toggle between the two. Sometimes I like to do that if I'm kind of unsure, am I allowed to commit over here to feeling kind of more open and trusting today? I will just try how it feels each way a little bit, and see how it's feeling. I also think in applying this to a more chronic situation, something where you are dealing with long-term stress, where you are going through a very long season of contraction. Number one, right? We don't have to judge this. There's nothing wrong with this. It's a natural part of growth and change. It's a natural part of how we react to our very stimulating world. There's a lot going on. But this micro practice, applying it as a small step just to visit that other vision, to imagine that switch being switched, just going over there for a little while, can give us enough breath to welcome in some different modalities. We don't need to constantly be an open and trusted space. I think the goal of always being open and flowing, I mean, what a fun vision. I know I have held myself to that standard in years past. We don't have to do that. And having the compassionate mechanics of noticing how we embody each of these states, what happens is we notice, oh, I'm contracted. Oh, I'm in control phase. Oh, I've got really laser focused vision on this thing. And then seeing it not as a moral issue, not as something that is very right and is the way to do it, or very wrong and is the way not to do it, depending on which lens is screaming at you from which culture. We'll just be able to witness it. We'll understand ourselves much better. We'll understand, is this a longing for something, a longing to be loved, a longing to be safe? Is this something that is helping me get through something via adrenaline or activity? Or is it something that's maybe not helping? Maybe I don't need it, right? It allows us to have more awareness of the energetics we are embodying. Now, I will say this. The contracted control state, like I said, it's an important, kicking things over here. It's an important part of the process. It's natural to go into our shell. It's natural to get into a focused mode sometimes. It's natural to sometimes resist when we are stepping into unknown. So we don't want to push this off out into the wilderness and leave ourselves stranded out there without these tools. We want this embodiment sometimes. But we also don't want it to become an encased prison where it feels like this is the only place we can do anything from, right? Because it is true that as we switch out of contraction control, we switch into kind of a deep surrender. We ask for that help from every and all benefic forces around us, and we just hand some of that over. It is a rest point. It also allows new information and new material to come in if there is a problem or an unanswered, uncertain time moving through your life at this time. So it is beneficial to take breaks from the shell and open to it. And I think that this toggling between can really help us do that. But I think more than anything in this conversation, take a look at, take some time to journal about what moral stories you notice about yourself when it comes to being either in contraction or in openness. Each of us is going to have a different map with this. Personally, I have judgments about both. I have the American work ethic guilt around being in that contracted control state is the good way. And I also have the spiritual world messaging about I should be always open and always feeling good. So for me, I really question both of these and the role that they're playing in my ability to contract and open naturally, like a flower overnight will close and open into the morning sun. This is very natural energetics, which is why it's important for us to build our ability to toggle between the two, to notice them, and to have a little bit more connection with which one we are embodying at which times. So that's essentially what this is all about, and really honoring which one we are in, the underground or the above ground, the shell or the cracking open. And we will toggle between these two anytime we are going through massive transformation or ingesting a lot of new information. So I hope that this was helpful and soothing and cozy. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. I feel like there's so much more to discuss about this, but this was just my opening foray. I would love to see you on my Patreon. This is where we dive deep on archetypes, astrology. It's a great community. I would love to see you there. We do such cozy work together. You can also find me on my Instagram and on my email. So I will leave all of those links and handles below. And also keep an eye out for dupe accounts on Instagram. That's the popular thing. There's a lot of scammers out there. So just follow the handle that I put here. Be very specific about the spelling. And I will love to see you in all those places. Stick around for more conversations like this. I hope you have a beautiful day, night, morning, wherever you are in the world.